Hello, and welcome to the Random House Children's Books Spring 2023 preview. I'm Sarah Hunter, Books for Youth and Graphic Novels editor at Booklist. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. Links to today's slide presentation and title list were included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the links located there. You can also download the slides and title list by copying the URLs on this screen into your web browser. If you have any trouble accessing the materials, please contact us at webinars@booklistonline.com. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we'll pass along all other questions to today's panelists so they can follow up with you after the webinar. Last but not least, Booklist offers closed captioning on all webinars. To enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the live transcript icon on the toolbar mentioned earlier. From there, you can select Show or Hide Subtitles from the menu that appears. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by selecting Subtitle Settings. The Random House Children's School Library team will join us in a little bit to introduce their wonderful spring list, but first we'll hear from the talented team behind Remember, Joy Harjo and Michaela Goade. Joy Harjo is a 23rd Poet Laureate of the United States, is an internationally renowned performer and writer of the Muskogee Nation. Harjo is the author of 9 poets of poetry, several plays, children's books, and 2 memoirs. She has also produced 7 award-winning music albums and edited several anthologies. Her many honors include the Ruth Lilly Prize from the Poetry Foundation, the Academy of American Poets Wallace Stevens Award, 2 NEA fellowships, a Guggenheim Fellowship, and a Tulsa Artist Fellowship. She is a Chancellor of the Academy of American Poets and Chair of the Board of Directors of the Native Arts and Cultures Foundation. She lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where she is the first artist in residence for the Bob Dylan Center. Follow her on Twitter at Joy Harjo and on Instagram at Joy Harjo for real. Michaela Goade is a Caldecott medalist and a #1 New York Times bestselling artist. She is the illustrator of a number of award-winning and best-selling books, including We Are Water Protectors by Carol Lindstrom and I Sang You Down from the Stars by Tasha Spillett Sumner. Her latest title, Berry Song, is her first book as an author and illustrator. She is a member of the Tlingit Nation and grew up in her ancestral homelands along the southeast coast of Alaska, where she lives today on an island at the edge of a wide, wild sea. Find her on Twitter at Michaela Goade, and on Instagram at Michaela Goade. Joy and Michaela will be joined by their editor, Lee Wade, who is the VP and publisher of Random House Studio. So without further ado, take it away, Lee.
Hi. Hi. Well, it has been just such a pleasure working on this book with Michaela and Joy. And I'm just so happy to be here today to ask them some questions and for you all to get a sense of these 2 amazing women and this incredible book that they've created together. So I'm going to start with a question for you, Joy. I was just so excited to first hear the poem Remember and sort of be able to envision it for a book for children. And it made me wonder about you, Joy, as a little girl and sort of your introduction to poetry or art, music, and then sort of how your sort of evolution into who you are today happened. So just a little bit about your childhood and how it's led you here.
Yes, I feel like I came out of the womb doing artwork. And while I was in there, when I came out, was my mother singing, and she loved poetry from her. She grew up from a sharecropper family and um, grew up in a 1-room or 2-room schoolhouse, and they had to memorize poetry. And on the other end, we had paintings by my grandmother, Naomi Harjo, Full Blood Creek, who also played saxophone in Indian Territory. And so, for me, the poetry is always kind of lives with music and even with art or painting. I remember telling the artist John Quick to See Smith once that she paints like a writer and I write like a painter.
I love it. And And then Michaela, sort of same kind of thing. Before we get into the specifics about the book, I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about, sort of where your journey started as an artist and how it's evolved to where you are today.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Ganesh Chish. And thank you. I'm so excited to be here with Joy. And thank you to Booklist as well. Similar to Joy, I just have a lot of memories of being involved in the arts growing up, whether it was just different after school programs or different summer art programs, just classes in school, or even just in free time, doodling and sketching and writing little stories. And I'm no poet, but I always loved poetry as well. And I was also involved a lot in music, in singing and musical theater. And so I just loved it all. And when I got older, it was great, but also kind of a challenge choosing which direction, which path to follow, because I had a lot of interests. And eventually I studied art in college, but specialized in graphic design because I thought it would give me the best shot of a job, which it did. And I did that for a couple of years up in our big city in Alaska, in Anchorage, as a graphic designer and art director. And I enjoyed parts of it, but eventually I just kind of felt like my spirit was dying. And I know that sounds dramatic, but I could only do so many annual reports and logos and branding materials for clients I often really didn't care much about, which sounds bad, but it's like telling stories or working on books that you have a hard time connecting with, and you do that for a while, and it's just really hard on you. And so I moved home. I went full-time freelance and ended up working with our native corporations. We have corporations, not reservations here. And sort of our cultural organization called the Alaska Heritage Institute was doing a grant-funded literacy program, Native Stories for Native People by Native People. And they were trying to do a series of children books illustrated by artists from the tribal communities. And so I worked on like 4 books with them and got to learn the art form a bit. And I'd always wanted to get into picture books and narrative art and that sort of world, but I had no idea how and didn't really think it was a feasible, path. And so I feel very fortunate to have sort of found myself here. And one of those books got the eye of an editor with Little Brown. And so that's just sort of how it all unfolded from that point. But yeah, I think just always like Joy involved in the arts and music from a very early age.
Well, we're very glad you got involved.
Yes, I am too, and I'm so happy to meet you here. Where are you living? You were living up in Alaska?
Yes, I am in Sitka or Sitka, which is an island in Southeast Alaska. And I grew up nearby in Juneau, Alaska, but Sitka is where my Singit family is originally from. So we've lived here for a couple of years now, and it's been really wonderful.
Well, I was so happy to work with you on this because, when we were getting started and you asked me about the art, could you use your own community instead of having to learn a whole new, because we're all different. I don't know if people know we're like over almost 600 tribal nations. We sometimes, like you said, corporations, settlements, all kinds of configurations. But I wanted you to do what was important close to you. And also I've been up in your area a lot. One time I was on a mail plane to Haines and stayed at the up in Clickwan community, and or stayed in Haines at the Raven House. And I've been up there, and and it was, to me, in a way, it was to honor the poet Nora Dowenhauer, who was a kind of mentor and friend, who did a lot of translation of poetry, translation of community.
Icon, yeah.
Yes.
She's a big name in this region in terms of preservation and poetry and transcribing language and preservation. Yeah. I thought that was so neat too when we learned about that connection.
That's so nice. And Joy, where are you today? We didn't ask you where you are.
Yes, I'm in Tulsa, or the Muskogee Creek Nation Reservation.
Nice.
I came back home.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I came back home. I left here to go to Indian boarding school in Santa Fe, and I got in based on my art and wound up in drama and dance and so on. But
both are, you're just very, you're both examples of people who are creative in in many, many, many ways. And Joy, you've never really had to narrow down your focus. I mean, you've really been able to sort of express yourself in all these different ways, which is inspiring.
Yes, despite being, can you imagine being a mother with two children, single mother, and in working on a BFA in art, and then the poetry thing takes over, and can you imagine, well, I'm going to major in poetry, and the reaction, it's like, it makes no sense at all, but you have to follow. It's like following, it moves through you.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you don't follow what you were given to do, that's where we wind up in some really rough places, I think.
Yeah, I think that's really true. So let's talk a little bit specifically about the picture book, Remember. So this is your iconic poem. You wrote it in 1983. It's been made into a song. People have danced to it. I know it's currently, I believe, on a spacecraft heading to Jupiter, which sort of blows my mind. And when I first read the poem, I could immediately see that would be perfect for a picture book. And I'm wondering if you could tell us where you were in your life when you wrote Remember, and how you think it has particular resonance for young readers.
I was an undergrad, actually. It was published, I think, in She Had Some Horses in 1983. But I'd written it somewhere it's been 50 years this year since I started publishing poetry. And I started publishing as soon as I started writing it almost. And it was one of the earlier poems. I've been writing a couple of years as an undergrad at the University of New Mexico. And I was asked to write something to inspire younger Native poets. And I was just beginning. So it's one of my earliest poems. And like art, there's usually something you've been studying or working on, or issues, whatever, inspirations, obsessions. And the poem just started coming through. Of course, I revise a lot and rework and so on. But it was as a student at the University of New Mexico, where we were dealing with Native rights, going out into the communities and listening to testimonies of the indigenous peoples there, who were talking about, really in their speeches, when they were talking to companies and so on, they were always showing this connection between the land, between each other, and between the stars. I mean, that was it seemed to me that their speech talk, which was poetry, this connection was always embedded. And I think that influenced, I think, very much this poem and how it came to be. It's like I feel like with my poetry, it's the same with my sax sound. There's somebody older and wiser than me who knows a lot more than I do, because I needed this poem, as a kid, basically just as a kid. And yeah, that voice is older and wiser. And this poem, it's amazing. It has its own life. It's amazing how it's gotten out there, despite me.
It really has. And I think I heard you say, you were talking about this poem and sort of how it can help children become poets, because it's, everyone has memories, and every single line of the poem starts with the word remember. So I thought that was sort of like a very interesting way for teachers and educators to sort of talk about this poem, and also how it can help kids write their own poems. Seems like a good jumping off point.
It is, and it has been. Over the years, I've had teachers send me packets of their students' poems with remember as the prompt. So, and that still happens.
I think it's going to happen a lot more now.
Probably.
And Michaela, so let's talk about the artwork in Remember. And I think we have some pieces that we're going to share with the audience. This is the first time that you've brought a more localized sort of personal lens to a story written by an author belonging to a different Native nation. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how that came about, and also just how you found your way into telling this story visually.
Yes. So With every manuscript and story that I start working with, I have to sort of decide, where am I going to set the story? Where am I going to root this? Not just where, but like whose people? I think every illustrator thinks a lot about those sorts of questions before beginning, but as Native peoples and working with Native authors, I think there's an extra element of consideration for these questions, you know, because where we come from, who we come from, like Joy talks about, our stories, our land, it's all so important. And so they're big questions. Oftentimes when I work with authors from different indigenous nations, oftentimes I have rooted it in their culture, because like Joy was talking about, there's, you know, almost 600 federally recognized tribes. There's hundreds more that don't have that federal recognition, but all very distinct nations with their own histories and language and culture and traditions. And so I am an outsider a lot of the times when I work on these books. And so rooting it in the author's culture and being able to ask them questions and honor them as a storyteller, honor their culture is important to me. But for this one, I did play around with rooting it in Joy's, like more her experience and culture, but it has this cosmic feeling to it, and it felt right to bring up, or to at least explore bringing my own personal lens to this story, because it's also what Joy is encouraging in her poem, is to remember who you are, remember your own stories. And so it felt just right to do that. And it's important that if I'm going to do that, it never feel forced, and it comes from an honest, authentic place. And for this one, I played around with different ideas, rooting it in Joy's culture, maybe rooting it in like a collective approach and weaving the stories of different children and families from different parts of the country together, which seemed like a viable option. But then I'd be spending so much time researching the what and the where, and I felt like I wouldn't be able to spend as much time with the why and like getting into the depth that I felt Joy's poem was asking for. And so it wasn't until really playing around with the early sketches and the first few spreads that things clicked. The first few lines of Joy's poem, I remember the stars, or essentially she's asking us to remember the stars, and then the moon, and then the sun. And in that particular order, I found a similarity to our Tlingit creation stories, where Raven releases first the stars, then the moon, and then the sun. And that's how he brings daylight to the earth. And Raven is this pivotal figure in Pacific Northwest Native cultures, but he's this trickster. He's also benevolent, but he's like sort of the nexus for all of our creation stories. And so I had this idea to do like a sort of this primordial beginning with how we became human, as I heard Joy speak about when she was talking about this poem and a recording. And so it begins with the creation story. And you could, this is the Remember the Stars. And then if you could hit the next slide, please. This is Remember the Moon, know who she is. And so again, Raven here is releasing the moon, and also around it are different imagery relating to our Tlingit moon calendar. And like black or blueberry, or like hair growing on seal pup month, or underwater plants month, or goose month, black bear month, salmon moon, you know, all these sorts of elements I try to incorporate here. Go to the next slide, please. And this is Remember the Sun's Birth at Dawn. And this is an allusion to the creation story of how Raven goes up the Nass River and finds the old man who's greedily keeping all of the stars, the moon, and the sun. And yeah, once I sort of found that anchor, the rest just sort of flowed. And I worked in elements of Tlingit formline, which is a unique, beautiful ancient art form that you see with different Pacific Northwest nations that each have their own unique spin on it, like you can see in the face of the raven. And I'm not a traditional formline artist, but I love learning formline. And so it was a wonderful opportunity to learn more about that art style and incorporate some elements into to really like they're visual poems to me. And as Joy says in the poem, she has a line that says they are alive poems. And so I really loved that. so yeah, I wanted to play with those elements. Next slide, please. And also just brought a more personal lens in. I imagined a young girl, young Tlingit girl, as she is called upon to remember who and where she comes from, and how this informs her her experience as she grows up and she grows into herself and she becomes more confident. She knows she has all of her culture and her ancestors and her community behind her as she moves forward and dances through life. And this also felt beautiful because I wouldn't be able to have done this artwork the way I did had it not come at this time, which I guess is, you could say, for any book, but this one in particular, I've been on a personal journey of like reconnecting to culture and learning more about my family. And yeah, so this is a direct reference here to the herring robes that we have here as Kikseti women. We're known as herring protectors and herring women. And so these are actually dance robes that I got permission to reference for this page that have been new additions the last couple of years into our annual herring ceremony and herring gathering here in Sitka.
Wow. I mean, they are just absolutely stunning. And obviously I've seen them before, but I love looking at these and hear you talk about them. And I will say, I did not see the face in this middle robe.
Oh, you did.
No, until now.
Herring, that's herring woman. So the story, the robes, the dance robes tell this story of herring woman, how she sort of helped create the annual migration of the herring return, which are a keystone or touchstone species in the region, and so much of the health of this region depends on the health of the herring. So yeah, so it's inspired by Standing Rock water protectors. There's herring rock water protectors, or herring rock protectors here.
There's just so much in this book. I just really, I love looking at this artwork. And you know, you said earlier that you used to be a graphic designer and art director, and I think we should just share with the audience that I think that experience of yours just makes your books even like much stronger visually. Like you have an incredible sense of composition, and you have a great sense of design too. We worked really hard on that jacket, and you were amazing helping us.
Many book designers, I think, dismay.
No, we like it. We appreciate it. We really, really do. Well, thank you so much. And now, Joy, I'm just going to come back to you. And we did you sort of talked about this a little bit, but I really do like the way you very much like to have the illustrators who are working on your stories draw on their own experience. Like Michaela just explained to us how she drew on her Tlingit experience. And we're working on a book with you with Shanto Begay, who is setting your story in a Navajo nation. So I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about why you see this as important, and also just a little bit about how young readers benefit from stories by and about Indigenous creators.
Wow. Well, if I'm asked to write a poem, I can write poems towards something. And I don't know, sometimes there's just a fit. I mean, there is a fit, and it's like, you heard Michaela talk about how all of this fit into that creation story, and it found its way. It's almost like it was written to be there, that there was some coming together and it's amazing how it all fits together. And with Shanto, I've known Shanto for a long time. His work is amazing, and it's really I've noticed it seems to be really finally getting out there. And I know he would do an excellent job with that story. And then what was the next question? It was.
Well, your audience here, we are always searching for more Indigenous stories.
Yes.
Because we know the value. But I thought maybe it would be nice to hear you talk about the importance of Indigenous stories by Indigenous creators for children and how that can benefit them.
Right, because this is Indigenous country. I mean, if you think of African, you think of Africans, you think of Europe, you think of Europeans. This is the Americas are indigenous of all kinds, and so our stories, in a way, they kind of root people. They're sort of like rooting, in our art, or rooting elements that help essentially keep the world going, and that can be very complex, and it's another that goes off in another story. But they're important because we're human beings, and stories are in part human beingness and who we are, and how we live, and we need that. I remember making that transition from being a young artist and moving into poetry and thinking, wait a minute, I know how to be in that space, and this is something else, and it's very different, and I had to follow it. But I remember thinking of images, thinking of how that whatever I did in my art, by the time I left this world, I wanted Native people to be seen as human beings. And that sounds almost simple or ridiculous. I mean, why? But it's so true. We are, it's just like Michaela is backing. We're so many different nations. A lot of people don't know a lot of the Alaska Native groups are under, corporations, and there's so much complexity that, and you heard in that creation, there's so much complexity, and it affects everything. And those are the stories, it gives grounding. It's like, here we are. It's larger than a land acknowledgement. It's deeper. Like, here we are, we're human beings, and we're part of you. And we are part of this story. And these stories are important and necessary, and the kids need to know they're part of a community. And even non-Native kids, they're part of this community called North America, these plants and the stories that are from here and the people.
I love it. Well, yeah, thank you so much for that. Michaela, can you talk about what you see happening in children's publishing in regards to Indigenous creators, and the importance that you see it is for the rest of us?
Yes. I think one disclaimer, I feel like I haven't been in the industry for too many years, but even I guess it's slowly creeping up, but like when I had my first book published with like a major trade publisher in 2019, at the end of 2019, and then the world shut down. So I still am like learning a lot of things and learning how this industry works. But even in that short amount of time, I feel like I have witnessed the number of books by Native bookmakers start to really grow quickly. Even in sort of seemingly unimportant things like on Indigenous Peoples Day, which was just a couple of days ago. Nowadays, it feels like it's nonstop notifications or whatever. People are tagging your books, tagging to make all these sorts of things. And that didn't happen a few years ago. And I'm seeing these collections that are being shared every year growing and growing. And it's really wonderful to see. Of course, there's a long ways to go. I don't think you can ever have too many, but it feels like at least it's going in a promising direction. I'm also loving seeing so many Native artists on things on like Instagram who aren't traditional book makers, but they're insanely talented visual artists. I'm seeing a lot more crossover now between them getting book contracts, which is so exciting. And we're seeing a lot of, I think, Native artists merging into this more Western publishing industry. And that's incredibly important for all of us to have these stories. Joy touched on that. I think we're all looking for connection, and this idea of home, I think, can be very ambiguous for a lot of people and hard to feel a connection to where they're from. And I think these Native stories can help all of us with treated with respect and never like appropriated or anything like that. But with treated with respect, I think they can help us all. There's so much there, Indigenous wisdom and Indigenous science, so many important lessons. And for non-Native children too, like Joy was talking about, it helps teach compassion, open minds for all of us, sees everyone as human. Native children see these stories being elevated. They see themselves being elevated, and in a world that has so often told them that they're not important, or they're invisible, or stereotyped. It's so important to see themselves celebrated and all of their beautiful stories and their beautiful heritage and culture. And the more diverse like Native bookmakers that we see, the more authentic collections we're going to see. And I think we're working towards this future where we have Tlingit author with a Tlingit illustrator, or we have Navajo author with a Navajo illustrator, and that's normal, and that's like not super rare. But I do also think there's a lot of beauty and importance that can come from pairing, like Joy and I, where we're different nations, we have different experiences. It's just, you need it all, I think. It's just really important.
Yes, and a good resource is Debbie Reese has she's got a really good, I guess, blog and I don't know if she has a website, but that gives you a good idea of what's out there for Native children's books written by
American
natives.
Indians and Children's Literature, I think, is the AICL. Debbie Reese, Cynthia Leidick Smith as well.
Yes.
It's a great resource as well.
Thank you. Wow, you both have been just amazing, and that was really beautifully said. I think we're coming to the end, but I did want to ask you both one last question, which is, what are you both reading these days?
It's a good question. I'm terrible. I start a bunch of books and then I just have like half, or no, like just they're all over the place. And I'm on a deadline right now, so I'm not reading as much as I want. But I did just start The Seed Keeper. I'm working my way through Joy's Poet Warrior. And also started a book called Babel. Is it Babel?
Well, it sounds like you've got your hands full, and a book you're trying to get together. So,
yeah.
Joy, how about you?
I've been reading. Sandra Cisneros has a new book of poetry out after some time, and I just, I went to school with her years ago, but I love what she's doing in this new book of poetry. It's so beautiful, outrageous, and funny and wise. And I forget the name of it. But you Google Sandra Cisneros, yes. The Dene Reader, which is kind of a first-time Dene or Navajo literary reader, is amazing. It just won an American Book Award. When I need to just let down, I read a lot of memoirs. And I just finished Paisley Rickdahl's memoir that's been out for a while about her. What is it? The Night My Mother Met Bruce Wayne. Not Bruce Lee, not Bruce Wayne. That's the Batman. Bruce Lee. So yeah, I read a lot of memoirs. There's a new one I'm getting. I have, like you, I have stacks, and I've also had 2 books coming out. I've been on the road, but so I have to put a lot of my books on my phone or my iPad. But I prefer holding real books. Marcy Rendon has a new mystery novel out called, I think, Sinister Graves. I knew Marcy when she was, I'm going to say, just a poet. When she was a poet, and now it's really nice to watch her at our age to go into a whole new genre of writing mystery. And it's really exciting to see that happen.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much. You're just both of you just breathtakingly impressive and warm and generous. And I know you're both incredibly busy, so we appreciate you taking the time and talking to us today. And at this point, I think we turn it over to Katie Halada.
Yes, hello. A big thank you to Joy, Michaela, and Lee for getting us off to such a great start with that wonderful conversation, and a warm welcome to all of you today. Welcome to the Random House Children's Book Spring 2023 preview. I am Katie Halada, the Director of Library Marketing, and on behalf of the whole school and library team, we are thrilled that you could join us today. We're excited to share some of our amazing books that we have coming this spring, and we're going to start things off with picture books. Next slide, please. Next slide. So to start things off, we'll kick things off with Remember. You've just heard about this stunning picture book directly from Joy and Michaela, the acclaimed creators behind the project. So I will simply add to their conversation that Remember is a true celebration of life and a title that you won't want to miss. Next. Everyone loves lunchtime but Zia. Everyone loves lunchtime. Everyone that is but Zia. Zia's always nervous about opening her lunchbox. Her dumpling and noodle dishes look different than the other kids' lunches. But when her parents begin to explain what the food represents, a roast pork to bring treasure, soy sauce chicken to bring success, Zia realizes her food to be the good fortune after all. I'm going to pass things over to Adrienne now for some social emotional learning picture book selections.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming. So the first book in our social emotional grouping is A Pocket Full of Sads by a husband and wife team who have published and written about this subject before. This unique and gentle approach not only explains the heavy-hearted feelings of sadness that can cloud our days, but also explores what it's like to be a supportive friend and how to help simply by listening. And I do want to add, there is a sense of appropriate humor to this book that will go a long way with your young readers. Next slide. And talk about humor and being funny. Little Cap, who happens to be a little mushroom boy, has a pet slug named Gustav. But when Gustav goes missing, Little Cap has to go on a brave journey to find him. This is a story that celebrates friendship, perseverance, and bravery by Andrea Zoll, who you might know from her books, Sweetie or Wolf Camp. Next slide. And The Blue Umbrella. This story is a magical celebration of kindness and sharing where a single umbrella grows and becomes shelter for a community. With its kid-friendly text and art, The Blue Umbrella is read aloud to pick up again and again. And next, Erica will tell us about some books.
Hi, The Green Piano. Open this book and see what inspired a 5-time Grammy Award winner's journey to stardom. It all started with The Green Piano. Little Roberta Flack didn't have much, but what she had was important. It was a loving family. And she also had a dream, to live a life filled with music. When her daddy brings home a beat-up old piano, he paints it grassy green, and Roberta is overjoyed. If she practices and practices and practices, maybe her dreams will come true. Next slide. Ice Cream Man. Before there were ice cream flavors for every taste bud, there was a boy named Gus who had a dream. Ice Cream Man takes readers back to a time when ice cream was a luxury enjoyed only by the wealthy. This story follows Augustus Jackson, an African-American born free during slavery, as he pursues his dream of making ice cream a sweet treat available for everyone. He knows that ice cream can put a smile on anyone's face, but can he find a way to make it faster or keep it from melting so quickly? Despite his humble beginnings, Augustus Jackson rose to become a White House chef, a creative problem solver, and a successful entrepreneur, all because he had a sweet dream. Next slide. Little Rosita and a Talking Guitar. This is the true story of the woman who invented rock and roll. Sister Rosetta Tharpe was a pioneer in music. Decades before Elvis was dubbed the king of rock and roll, and Bill Haley saw success with Rock Around the Clock, Sister Rosetta was playing and writing rock and roll music. Sadly, her career never reached the heights of her male counterparts, but she was posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2017. A fun fact, during Lizzo's SNL debut, her guitarist wore a heavy coat and a guitar strap that said Sister, which was a nod to the amazing Tharpe. In soaring language and evocative scenes, author and illustrator Charnel Tinkley Barlow imagines the childhood of little Rosita in Cotton Plant, Arkansas. Next slide. Sisters in Science. Discover the fascinating story of Marie Curie and her sister Bronia. You may have heard about Nobel Prize winner Marie Curie and her extraordinary scientific advances, discovering new elements and with her husband Pierre. But did you know about the powerful bond that propelled her into science? It was her sisterhood. It was her sisterhood with Bronia. Force in academia and healthcare, herself, Bronia provided loving support to her sister Marie and made her own significant contributions to the scientific world. And now over to Michelle.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Campbell and I am the Assistant Director of School Marketing here at Random House Children's Books. I think everyone in the room probably knows Melissa Stewart. She is widely recognized in the kidlit world for her nonfiction expertise, and she is the author of more than 200 science books for kids. Whale Fall is a new and fascinating nonfiction picture book about marine life, specifically what happens when a whale reaches the end of its life. Stunning illustrations detail the end of the life for the whale, also known as a whale fall, when its body sinks to the ocean floor and becomes an energy-rich food source for organisms living in the deep sea. Next slide, please. From microscopic organisms to giant cats, it's really surprising who you'll find awake in the middle of the night. Donna Jo Napoli offers a fantastic look at some nocturnal animals, and this narrative is an engaging read aloud all about nature at night. It will sit well next to books like Giant Squid on any shelf. Next slide, please. Joan Holub and Lori Keller both contribute years of experience and achievement in the children's book arena. Bears Are Best is laugh out loud prose meets nonfiction bear content that will really entertain the littlest learners and their caregivers. Along with all of the funny dialogue, don't miss the diagrams that analyze a bear's anatomy, information on diet and nutrition, and the back matter has a ton of resources so that kids can learn all the bear facts that they can. Next slide, please. Written by Lynn Cox, who is also a record-breaking swimmer, this is the true story of a sea turtle who swam the longest distance of any animal in recorded history. Children are always fascinated by underwater creatures, from whales to sharks to jellyfish, and this story really brings them all to life with additional information specifically about loggerhead turtles in Yoshi's journal. And the back matter includes a really great map of all of his adventures. And now over to Natalie.
Hi, my name is Natalie Capagrossi, and I'm here to talk about a few books related to imagination, beginning with The Artist. Here is an age-old question. What makes an artist an artist? Is it talent, creative spirit, a certain aesthetic or critical regard? Ed Veer, best-selling author-illustrator of How to Be a Lion, explores this question in The Artist, a picture book in which a brave little artist goes on an epic adventure to share her creativity with the world. This is the perfect book for creative kids or anyone setting out on a new path, as it encourages readers to face life's obstacles with a positive outlook. Next slide, please. Next is Nubby. Nubby is done. Like many beloved toys, he's been carried, buried, dropped, dragged, torn, worn, and even used as a nose wipe. This is no way for a dignified rabbit to be treated. He decides to strike out on his own in search of glory. As he tastes the possibilities of fame and riches, he starts to realize that they pale in comparison to the adventures he had at home, as unglamorous as they may have seemed. Where does Nubby really belong? Follow him on his path to discovering the value of home and a loving family. Next slide, please. And teachers I love the best. Make every week Teacher Appreciation Week. Acclaimed poet Taylor Mali honors the magic of teachers and mentors in this joyful, energetic, and uplifting book. It highlights sports, art, drama, music, and community educators, in addition to teachers of traditional academic subjects. With gorgeous and whimsical illustrations by Erica Root, here is a book that celebrates the commitment and diversity of the special people who mentor, lead, and inspire children. And next slide, please. As a student, math really scared me. If only I'd had a book by entrepreneur and Shark Tank fan fave Damon John to set me straight about some math basics, especially as they relate to making money. In Little Damon Learns to Earn, Damon John introduces kids to basic ideas about money and starting their own business in a highly accessible and entertaining picture book. And over to Erica.
Hi again. Step Into Reading. The unique Step Into Reading series offers books at 5 carefully developed skill levels tailor-made for the emergent reader. Promoting fluency and providing quality content, Step Into Reading has been trusted by educators for over 30 years and is the perfect resource for integrating science, social studies, and math. The program offers fiction favorites and includes popular characters such as Elbow Grease and Uni the Unicorn, who will excite even your most reluctant readers. Next slide, please. Just quickly, we're really excited to show you the next installments of these wildly popular chapter book series. We have one coming from the Magic Treehouse, Dragonstorm, and Spooky Sleuths. Next slide, please. New chapter book series, Unicorn Academy Treasure Hunt. What could make Unicorn Island even more magical? Hidden treasure. Follow the clues and solve the riddles to find it in this spin-off series of the New York Times best-selling Unicorn Academy series. Next slide. The Pizza and Taco. Bethie's Pizza and Taco are ready to rock out. They have a cool band name and some instruments. Well, sort of. And songs? Meh, kind of. Even without mad musical skills, how hard can it be? They think they have all the ingredients to rock the scene, but maybe this garage band should stay in the garage. And then we have Bobo and Pup-Up, Hatch an Egg. The newest Bobo and Pup-Up book answers the question, where do bears come from? Well, sort of. According to Bobo, they hatch from eggs. This story of mistaken identity and coincidence will have graphic novel chapter books readers laughing out loud while gaining confidence in reading. Super Pancake. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's a pancake? This delightfully clever graphic novel follows a pancake named Peggy, who accidentally develops superhero abilities and must defend her home, Breakfast Town, from the evil Dr. Breakfast Sandwich and his wicked hench toasts. And finally, Marshmallow Martians. Meet the Marshmallow Martians, squishy buddies who journey through their backyard portal in search of adventures on their favorite planet, Earth. This graphic chapter book is a great bridge to longer chapter books and graphic novels for emerging readers. And back to Katie.
All right. Excuse me. Moving over to middle grade, we're going to start things off with a few fantasy titles. The first one is Momo Arashima and the Sword of the Wind. All Momo wants for her 12th birthday is an ordinary life, but when her mother falls gravely ill, a death hag straight out of those childhood stories attacks Momo at the mall, and she's rescued by a talking fox. Ordinary has been thrown right out the window. Now Momo must face down demons intent on bringing about chaos in order to save the world. This is a thrilling and funny start to a new middle grade fantasy series. Next. Come See the Fair. 12-year-old orphan Eve Root travels the country pretending to channel spirits, which of course is impossible, right? Until one day she hears a voice in her head for real, telling her to come see the World's Fair in Chicago. There she meets a mysterious magician who says he needs her help to save magic, but not everything is as it seems. This is an unforgettable story of magic, mediums, and seances with a historical backdrop from the author of the National Book Award finalist, The Way Back. Next title. Heroes of Havensong. This middle grade fantasy debut follows 4 unlikely heroes: a boy turned dragon, his reluctant dragon rider, a runaway witch, and a young soldier. All 4 grew up on different sides of a war they didn't start, but are bound by the fates to save the world and magic itself. This is perfect for fans of Lisa McCain, Diane Wynne-Jones. Next. The Moth Keeper. Where Anya comes from, being a moth keeper is a huge responsibility and a great honor, and it's finally Anya's turn to become a moth keeper. She's excited to prove her worth and serve her village, but it turns out that being a moth keeper isn't exactly what she thought it would be. Kay O'Neill brings life to this beautifully illustrated graphic novel fantasy about the responsibilities you have to yourself and to your community. Next slide. The Enchanted Bridge. This is book 4 in the critically acclaimed Dragons in a Bag series by award-winning author Zeta Elliott. In the latest installment of this middle grade fantasy series, Jackson and his friends are on a mission to help all magical creatures from dragons in a bag. But things in the magical realm are more complicated than they seem. Give this series to fans of Dragon in the Sock Drawer and My Father's Dragon. Now over to Adrian for some middle grade mystery.
The Treasure Test, which is the Hide and Geek #2. The puzzle mystery series about 4 friends in a small town in New Hampshire is back. Gina, Edgar, Elena, and Kevin are called into action for another treasure hunt where they have to prove that their puzzle-solving skills are real. This is perfect for fans of the Parker Inheritance and the Mr. Lemoncello's Library, as well as the Mysterious Benedict Society books. This is a series to definitely get behind. Next slide. And Grace Needs Space. In this middle grade sci-fi graphic novel, family relationships are tested. When Grace heads off on what she thinks is going to be an adventure with her fun mom and leaves her boring mom home, things don't go as expected. Will Grace be able to make things right? This is a great way to discuss difficult family relationships. Next slide. And the fifth hero. Choose your path, change the story, save the earth. Here comes a new adventure series about climate superheroes in which the reader gets to help save the planet by choosing which storyline they think is the right one. 4 kids discover their superpowers and with the reader's help saves the earth. This book focuses on both small and large changes that people can make and includes back matter to further the cause. And over to Michelle.
Hello again. Crystal Giles is a champion for diversity and representation in children's literature. She made her debut with Take Back the Block, which received several starred reviews. Through engaging and accessible prose, Giles tells the story of a young boy who moved to North Carolina to live with his granny because his parents are incarcerated. After too many fights at the school that aren't even his fault, he starts spending his days at the rec center where he feels more comfortable. And there he picks up the game of chess. And at that moment, Lawrence is finally ready for a win in his life. Like the main character, Crystal grew up with an incarcerated parent and speaks to that in the author's note. This is such a powerful novel about family, forgiveness, and figuring out who you are. Next slide, please. Kelly J. Baptiste was the inaugural winner of the We Need Diverse Books short story contest. Her debut novel, Isaiah Dunn is My Hero, received 2 starred reviews. Ebb and Flow tells the stories of 2 tweens who get into a fight at school, but neither of them think that they were in the wrong, and they both end up with a 10-day suspension from school. Through dual narration, this novel in verse shows readers the parallel lives of Ebb and Flow, both from a single-parent household with tight funds and siblings who don't make life any easier for them. Hand this to fans of the crossover and anyone looking for a fresh perspective. Next slide, please. Maria Jose Fitzgerald is a former teacher who loves to snorkel and hike in her homeland of Honduras, which is the setting for her middle grade debut, Turtle of the Midnight Moon. We follow Verana, who lives in a coastal village of Honduras, and Abby, who is visiting from New Jersey, and this is where her poppy grew up. But when poachers threaten the island that they both love, they team up to save the turtles and each other. Equal parts empowering and entertaining, this eco-mystery is a true friendship story that celebrates the bond between animals and kids. Give this to fans of Tay Keller and Carl Hyacin. Next slide, please. Bree Spangler is an award-winning author and illustrator whose books have received several starred reviews. Fox Point's own Gemma Hopper is a heartwarming graphic novel about a baseball-obsessed 7th grader. Gemma loves playing baseball, but when her mother is away and her dad is really busy working overtime, she's busy with household chores like doing laundry, making lunches, and getting her younger twin brothers to do their homework. And so she really doesn't have time to take baseball too seriously. But that doesn't stop her from practicing with her brother Teddy every afternoon. She throws him pitches, and he's also really excited about baseball and will probably eventually be in the major league. But she practices with him every afternoon. This is a graphic novel that is pitch perfect for fans of Roller Girl, Real Friends, and drama. Next slide, please. Kate O'Shaughnessy is a former chef, and in Lasagna Means I Love You, she asks the question, what are the essential ingredients that make a family? When 11-year-old Mo finds herself in foster care Instead of getting a hobby that was suggested to her, like ferret racing or palm reading, luckily she finds an old notebook full of someone else's family's recipes and stories. As she starts to make the recipes, she also starts to write a blog, and she creates a website, and she's really hoping that someone will see that, and someone from the family that these stories are from will see that and reach out to her so that she can be a part of their family. But ultimately, she learns that if she wants a family and family recipes of her own, she'll create that herself. Told through letters, recipes, emails, and blogs, this is a heartwarming story that is just right for fans of Because of Winn-Dixie or Fish in a Tree. And now over to Natalie.
The Sum of Us. This New York Times adult bestseller is now adapted for young readers in a book for grades 5 and up. This book is a call to action. Heather McGhee examines how damaging racism is, not only to people of color, but also to white people. She offers hope and real solutions so society can prosper. An expert in economic policy, McGhee draws lessons both from her work at a think tank and from her travels around the country, talking to everyday Americans fighting for a more just and inclusive society. Be sure to include this in your nonfiction collections. Next slide, please. Songs of America. Take a journey through American history, following the songs that shaped and united a nation. An adaptation for young readers of the outstanding adult bestseller by John Meacham and Grammy Award-winning artist Tim McGraw, Songs of America explores the music of the most important times in our history. The stirring pro and anti-war music of the Revolutionary and Civil Wars, Vietnam War protest songs, the folk songs and popular music of the Great Depression, the fight for women's rights, the Civil Rights Movement, and the songs of both beloved and lesser-known poets, musicians, and writers from colonial times all the way to the 21st century. Next slide, please. Mazoon. I had nothing but my voice, so I used it. This eye-opening memoir tells the story of a young girl's life in Syria, her family's wrenching decision to leave their home, and the upheaval of life in a refugee camp. Though her life had utterly changed, one thing remained the same. She knew that education was the key to a better future. This eye-opening story will help young readers understand what it means to be a refugee, the value of education, and the importance of using your voice. Next slide, please. A Mighty Long Way. Follow the story of Carlotta Walls Lanier, who in 1957, at the age of 14, was one of 9 Black students who integrated the all-white Little Rock Central High School and became known as the Little Rock Nine. Ultimately, Carlotta Walls Lanier became the first Black female ever to walk across a Central High stage and receive a diploma. The Little Rock Nine experienced traumatic and life-changing events, not only as a group, but also as individuals, each with a distinct personality and a different story. This is Carlotta's courageous story, adapted for young readers. Next slide, please. And here we have several powerhouse paperbacks. We have a Newbery Medal winning When You Trap a Tiger, a middle grade novel from best-selling author Nick Stone, and Maisie Chen's Last Chance, just named a finalist for the National Book Award for Young People's Literature. These are paperbacks you cannot miss. And over to Adrienne.
Thank you. Hopefully the 4 books on this slide look familiar to you and your readers. These are all graphic novel series that have the next chapters in their stories coming out this spring. And then next slide. And here are 3 middle grade series that have new books coming out as well. Don't miss them. And over to Katie.
All right, we're going to move on into young adult with some thriller titles. The first one up is The Black Queen. Nova Albright was going to be the first Black homecoming queen at Levitt High, but now she's dead. Her body found the morning after coronation night in the old slave cemetery she spent her weekends working to rehabilitate. Tinsley MacArthur should have been queen. She's beautiful, wealthy, and white. And it's her legacy. Her grandmother, mother, and sister all wore the crown before her. Everyone knows that Tinsley would do anything to carry on the tradition, and no one is more certain of this than Nova's best friend, Duchess. Duchess is determined to prove Tinsley's guilt, and to do that, she'll have to get close to her. Fans of One of Us is Lying and The Other Black Girl will love this meaty thriller. Next. The Island. Jagged Island is a private amusement park for the rich and influential. Liam, James, Will, Ava, Harper, and Paisley have been invited for an exclusive weekend before the park opens to create content for their social media channel. When they arrive, they're blown away by all the island has to offer. But soon they'll discover that something's missing from their schedule, getting off the island alive. From New York Times bestselling author Natasha Preston comes another pulse-pounding YA thriller. Next. Royal Blood. 17-year-old American Evan Bright is the illegitimate daughter of the King of England. When her identity is mysteriously revealed, she suddenly finds herself thrust into the spotlight. When a fun night turns deadly, Evan becomes the primary suspect in a murder investigation. As she fights to uncover the truth behind what happened, she discovers royal secrets that are even more scandalous than she could imagine. This is the first book in a thrilling new series. Handing things over to Adrian for some contemporary YA titles.
In Imposter Syndrome and Other Confessions of Alejandra Kim, Patricia Park makes her YA debut. You might know her from her award-winning adult novel, Ray Jane. This funny, poignant, and powerful novel about a multicultural teen trying to fit into her whitewashed school, her diverse Queens neighborhood, and even her own home as her family reels from the loss of her father. The author, Ellen O, said, an authentically funny, honest, and real portrayal of the fight to be seen. Simply magnificent. Next slide, please. Kristen R. Lee's first novel came out earlier this year to nice critical acclaim. Sun Keep Rising is her second novel, and she gives us a compelling story about a teen mom navigating income disparity, racial inequality, and defying challenges to protect those she loves. Next slide. In Dear Medusa, author Olivia A. Cole uses the Medusa myth to tell the story of a 16-year-old girl who was sexually abused but is trying to reclaim her story, her anger, and her body. Samira Ahmed, the New York Times bestselling author of Interment and Hollow Fires, says, this fierce and brightly burning feminist roar paints a devastating and haunting portrait of a vulnerable young woman discovering the power of her voice, her courage, and her rage. Next slide. And then for something completely different, you might know Cameron Garrett from her first two novels, Off the Record or Full Disclosure. But if you don't, this is the book you should read from Cameron. Friday I'm in Love is for fans of Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. It's a feel-good story and rom-com that highlights Black joy and queer pride. Just like in all of the best teen rom-coms, a big party is planned, but lack of money and school woes threaten to end it before it even starts. Will Mahalia have the party of her dreams? And will the new girl decide to like her back? Read to find out. Next slide. And French Kissing in New York is a trade paper original that is a charming, high-energy romance in the city that never sleeps about a girl who can't wait to be a part of Manhattan's restaurant scene and find the boy she fell for last summer. It's perfect for fans of Emily in Paris. And over to Erica.
Hi again. I'm thrilled to present the next two titles as they make up the inaugural list of Joy Revolution. Joy Revolution is a new imprint co-founded by New York Times bestselling authors Nicola and David Yoon. These stories will be about people of color searching for love and living their lives on their own terms. It is a safe haven for readers to celebrate the full breadth of their humanity. Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute. From the New York Times bestselling author of the Brown Sisters trilogy comes a laugh-out-loud story about two ex-best friends, a quirky content creator, and a clean-cut athlete. Forced to work as a team for the chance to win a grand prize in an outdoor survival contest, these two teens must trudge through not just mud and dirt, but their messy past. As this adventure brings them closer together, they begin to remember the good bits of their history, but has too much time passed, or is it enough to spark a new kind of relationship? Next slide, please. Queen Bee. Lady Dalvey is seeking retribution against her backstabbing former best friend and finds her plans slightly derailed when she catches the eye of a familiar and handsome Marquis. In this complicated game of real-life chess, Lady Dalvey must choose her next move, bring down the queen or capture the king's heart. Best-selling author Amelie Howard delivers a delightful historical Regency-era romp that's Bridgerton meets the Count of Monte Cristo. And back to Michelle.
Hi, everyone. So everyone knows Alexandra Bracken because she's the #1 best-selling author of Lore and the Darkest Minds. Her fantasy world building is so thoughtful and truly unforgettable. Silver in the Bone is a stunning series opener inspired by Arthurian legend and fueled by love, revenge, and pure adrenaline. Tasman Lark didn't ask to be a follower, but after her thieving foster father disappeared without as much as a goodbye, it was the only way to keep herself and her brother alive. 10 years after he leaves, rumors start to fly that her guardian vanished with a very powerful ring from Arthurian legend. As word spreads, and many would kill to have that ring for themselves, Tasman has to find a way to get that ring before anybody else does. This mythological retelling is high stakes, female-led, enemies to lovers, and truly cements Bracken as one of the top fantasy writers writing today. We're really happy to be publishing this. Next slide. Oh, perfect. Amelia Wen Zhao was born in Paris and grew up in Beijing, where she spent her days reenacting tales of legendary heroes, ancient kingdoms, and lost magic at her grandmother's courtyard house. This book, written by her, Song of Silver Flame Like Night, is Chinese inspired. It's an epic fantasy that celebrates China's rich mythology while exploring the pain of colonization and forced assimilation. Through rich storytelling, readers are taken to a fallen kingdom where one girl carries the key to discovering the secrets of her nation's past and unleashing the demons that sleep at its heart. This is for fans of Six Crimson Cranes and the Untamed. Next slide, please. I'm sure readers are clamoring for the second book in a fantasy trilogy from the New York Times bestselling author of the Ash Princess series. This sequel to Cast in Their Bones is the story of 3 princesses and the destiny that they were born for: seduction, conquest, and the crown. And at its core, this is truly a series about being able to gain power even when you feel powerless. And Kirkus called it a dazzling female-led fantasy. Next slide, please. Set on a continent inspired by the Middle East, Spice Road was influenced by Maya's own heritage and the stories passed down to her from her parents, who fled Lebanon and resettled in Australia during the Lebanese Civil War. Spice Road is the first book in an epic fantasy series set in an Arabian-inspired land with secret spice magic. Raised to protect her nation from the monsters lurking in the sands, 16-year-old Amani must fight to find her brother, whose betrayal is now the country's greatest threat. This is for fans of Children of Blood and Bone, We Hunt the Flame, and An Ember in the Ashes. Next slide. Taylor K. Meha is the author of the critically acclaimed young adult fantasy duology, We Set the Dark on Fire and We Unleash the Merciless Storm. This is a compelling Latinx fantasy that truly keeps readers at the edge of their seat. This gorgeous and fast-paced story is about a girl who will do anything to protect her sister, even if it means striking a dangerous bargain. Brimming with adventure, peril, romance, and family bonds, this page-turner is full of dark forces, forgotten magic, and a heart-stopping queer romance. And now back to Natalie.
Wonderful. And we have hidden systems. We use water, electricity, and the internet every day. But how do they actually work? And what's the plan to keep them running for years to come? Dan Knott has taken the answers and turned it into an informative YA graphic novel. Full of art, maps, and diagrams, Hidden Systems is a thoughtful and humorous exploration of the history of science, and what needs to be done now to change the future. Next slide, please. And we have some compulsively readable YA coming out in paperback. The New York Times bestselling One of Us is Lying, a twisty thriller, Chlorine Sky, a moving novel in verse, LGBTQIA+ speculative fiction with Wilder Girls, and Aaron Craig's The House of Salt and Sorrows, which will whisk you away to a fairy tale. Beware, these are read in one sitting books, so clear your schedule. And back to Katie.
And that's it for us. Thank you all again for joining us today for our Spring 23 preview. For more information about our upcoming books and resources, please be sure to follow us online on Facebook and Twitter, and visit us online at rhteacherslibrarians.com. Thank you to everyone, and back to Booklist for some wrap up.
Thank you so much to the Random House Children's Book School and Library team, and an extra special thank you to our guests, Joy, Michaela, and Lee. Thank you again for that wonderful conversation. It was really lovely. Tomorrow, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's slide presentation, title list, certificate of completion, and video recording. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit www.booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones like those you see here. Now you can share Booklist love with everyone connected to your school district, library system, or higher learning institution. Booklist Online Unlimited offers just that, unlimited simultaneous access to 30 years worth of review and article archives, plus digital editions of all of our publications. For pricing and other questions, visit www.booklistonline.com/subscribe. Have you heard? Booklist Reader, our new magazine that offers reading recommendations to patrons of all ages, is coming to print this January. Go to bit.ly.booklistreader in print to find out how you can order print copies in bulk for your library. Already have a Booklist subscription? You can share the latest issue now. Go to our website for more details. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, and one more huge thank you to our panelists and to our sponsor, Random House Children's Books. This concludes today's webinar. See you next time.